Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is George Howson, and today we are here to preview the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix. And joining me today, we have Grid Talk and Monkey Seats, Tom Horrox. Tom, how are you?
Good, yeah, really good. Buzzing after the race of the weekend for obvious reasons, but I'll try to remain reasonably reasonably impartial.
Yeah, obviously, we've got two British McLaren fans on this podcast, so there will absolutely be zero bias whatsoever throughout this entire running. 100% guaranteed. But before we get into some non-biased preview of the Chinese Grand Prix, let's next turn our attention to our sponsor for this episode, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA to college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be a number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat-trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And like I said in the intro, we are starting with the Chinese Grand Prix. And this is a race that has been on the calendar now on and off for the last 21 years. Tom, we've got plenty of races to choose from, but what are your main memories of the Chinese Grand Prix over the years?
Well, the Chinese Grand Prix for me, I mean, it's been around since 2004. Obviously, we had the 4 years during COVID that it was, the Chinese 4 years during COVID where it just didn't run. It was the first to fall from COVID and then didn't come back for 4 seasons, which did seem a bit odd. But it's a weird one. It's got some unbelievably memorable moments and some just absolutely forgettable moments as well. I'm just thinking back to it goes all the way back to 2007. It's like my favorite memory from the Chinese Grand Prix. Well, not favorite, but most memorable memory. Obviously, with the whole Lewis Hamilton ending up in the gravel, going for the championship, and then weirdly, a lights to flag victory in 2008 always stays with me because I just remember being, oh, Lewis is going to be a. It's going to be a lights to flag victory after recompense for last year. So those two races always kind of stand out for me as ones that I remember in insane amount of detail. And then the Daniel Ricciardo win in 2018 with the great dive bomb on Valtteri Bottas was it will always stand out. And of course weirdly the moment from practice with the Toro Rosso, both wheels flying off, and those for me are the moments that really stand out. And I think with this generation of car, it should lead to some decent racing. It wasn't an incredible race last year, but that was due to a certain dominant driver at the time. But I think it can. I think it will lead to some good racing under this rule set. Which I mean, who knows what's going to happen next year? But this year, I think it should be a decent.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. I'm hoping so as well. It should suit the cars. There are quite a few high-speed corners in China. There is a whacking great long straight on the back straight. I think it was the longest straight on the calendar until a few have usurped it in later years, and we've got a quite long pitch straight as well. It's a very tricky track in terms of the front tires. A lot of long corners that absolutely eat up the front left in particular. Anybody who's played the Formula One game over the years will know how difficult that is to control in terms of the temperatures. But yeah, some great memories there. I mean, my with that two wheels flying off of the Toro Rosso, I always remember the fact that even though his front wheels have fallen off, you can still see Buemi steering the wheel, which it looks ridiculous, but everybody would do the same thing, especially if you're that used to being in the car. But I just find it so funny because it's doing absolutely nothing. China, of course, is also the home of where we saw that the torpedo as well emerged. Danny Kvyat with his first of two torpedoes on Sebastian Vettel in two races. Sorry, Tom, I can tell you're kind of angling yourself to cut in there. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just gonna weigh on what you were saying there with that. I just remember that happening in Monaco as well. Who was it? Was it Barrichello? Maybe lost both his wheels coming out the tunnel, and he did the same thing, just trying to steer when there was just nothing on the front end. So yeah, it's not. He's in good company. It's not just. It wasn't just him. But no, yeah, I agree. It's it's just that kind of thing that you were doing. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, it's absolutely fine. And yeah, unfortunately, I do remember 2007 for all the wrong reasons. That was an absolutely devastating moment. Something that we won't see a repeat of now because in true Formula One fashion, that gravel trap has been replaced with a tarmac runoff, which is fair enough, really. I wouldn't want to see somebody end up bogged down trying to get into the pits like that. But yeah, China's a decent track. It's produced some good races, but the less said about F1000 in 2019, the better. But yeah, we mentioned there that it was kind of a disappointing race race here last season because Max Verstappen was absolutely miles in front. But thinking pessimistically, we could see a repeat of that this weekend, not with Max Verstappen, but with the two McLarens, particularly after Verstappen fell behind Oscar Piastri. Those two really pulled out a gap in Australia. Dr. Helmut Marko has been saying that McLaren have about a second a lap on the rest of the field in terms of race pace, and to be honest, I think we did see that at Albert Park at times. My main real question is, can anybody stop McLaren? Because only the magic of Max Verstappen was anywhere near challenging those two in Australia. Could we see a repeat of that in China this weekend?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, everything that Helmut Marko says is
Mm.
absolutely taken seriously by us because he's a very knowledgeable and experienced man, and everything he says is gospel. So I'm sure that won't come up again later in this podcast. I don't think they got a second on the field, but what we saw in Bahrain testing was McLaren looking like they may have a slight edge in race pace and maybe have a difficult car, like a bit of a squirrely rear end. But history in the past has shown us that McLaren have not run well at Bahrain. They've never won in Bahrain, which is odd given their ownership status as well. So I know that McLaren haven't been winning an awful lot since 2012. So it's difficult to say that they've never won it. How could they never won it? But even so, they were winning races when Bahrain was on the calendar, but never managed to. And obviously, going to Australia, they had an edge in all conditions. It was if it was wet, they were fast. If it was dry, it was fast. If it was hot, they were fast. If it was cold, they were fast. So that's shown that at this track, they definitely were a cut above. But that being said, I don't think it's. I think they are definitely the favourites. They definitely do have an edge. Australia is an outlier. It's not as much of an outlier as it used to be now that they sped up some of the corners. So I think it's going to be McLaren will be the quickest car in China, but at least what we will have is we will have two incredibly determined, very evenly matched teammates. So you look back at when we had a dominant car in the past in Formula. I'm not saying McLaren's going to be dominant all season because you look ahead to round 9, we've got that tech directive coming in, which could potentially very easily just completely knock them off their perch. And it depends how competitive Red Bull are in the interim as well, and when McLaren are going to turn off the taps to 2026. So I'm not writing off the season saying it's going to be a domination, but if it is a domination and McLaren have by far the best car, don't worry, people. It's not going to be a repeat of 22, 23, 24. You only need to look back 10 years, which is not a long time ago, the start of the turbo hybrid era. The Mercedes had an incredibly dominant car. I challenge you to go back and watch the races from 2014 and point to me some bad races that were dull. It was only when one of the Mercedes was out of the picture. There was some amazing racing in the 2014 season. Obviously, reliability wasn't there like it is now because it was a brand new rule set at the time, so that did add some jeopardy. But you had the two drivers going at it, hammer and tong, Rosberg, Hamilton, all going for it all season. Went to the last race. Wouldn't have done had Bernie not introduced a stupid double points rule, but that's a different story altogether. But I don't think it's going to be like, it's not a case of going to be a dull season. No one can catch McLaren. But if they do, it will still be a great season because I cannot see either of those guys giving up on this championship. So I would say that McLaren will probably be the team to beat or be edging it in front up until Spain. After Spain, who knows? And it depends. If they've got a massive lead, they might just shut off development for 2026, which means that other teams will start to catch them up as the season goes on. So I'm optimistic for the season.
Yeah, me too. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want one driver dominating like we saw with Verstappen for this, the first half or so of last season. That's not very entertaining. But all you need are two cars two drivers potentially in the same car to be entertaining. I mean, people point at 1988 and 1989 as being classic seasons, but in reality, McLaren were absolutely miles ahead of the rest of the field during that time, but everybody remembers it rightly as a great season because Alan Prost and Ayrton Senna had a fantastic battle. I'm not for one second suggesting that Piastri and Norris are going to go down that kind of route of hitting each other and being elbows out and everything like that. But you never know. You want in a bit of excitement there. You want in a bit of entertainment there at least, And I feel like these two will be respectful of each other at least, and I want it to be a good battle, and I want someone else to be potential. I want Verstappen to at least be able to challenge them as well, like he was was in Australia. But we'll see what happens in China. I've just looked at the forecast as well for Shanghai. It looks like it's going to be hot and dry, so it's looking unlikely we're going to get any kind of wet weather. So it'll be completely different to Australia, completely different to Bahrain as well, where it was cold and wet in the desert. So it's going to be completely different track conditions, but that McLaren does look very strong in whatever kind of conditions is being served up, so look likely this weekend. Now, I mean, we did give a little mention there. We've got to talk about what Helmut Marko has been saying after Australia, Tom, because this really irked me to say the very least. I did see this story this morning, and I had to do a little video on the F1 Chronicle about it. But for those that don't know, Isaac Hadjar wasn't able to start the race in Australia because he crashed out on the formation lap. All the rookies struggled apart from Antonelli. Only Antonelli and Behrman actually managed to finish the race. All the other guys crashed out. Lawson, Doohan, Bortoletto, they all went out of the race. So it was really tricky conditions, especially for the rookies. And Hadjar was literally in tears. He was literally crying. He went back to the paddock, was still crying his eyes out. And Anthony Hamilton, Sir Lewis's dad, put his arm around him, comforted him, and said basically on the lines of, you're a real talent. You recover from this. Chin up. You got this. And his his boss, in a way, or at least someone associated further up in the Red Bull hierarchy, basically said that he was embarrassing to cry, to show his emotions like that. Now, I'm pretty sure what you're going to say here, Tom, but where do you stand on all this? Because Helmut Marko has definitely courted controversy for this, even by his standards.
I know where I'd like to stand. It involves him lying flat on the ground and my foot being somewhere near his neck. But I'm not gonna resort to violence. But okay. So let's just have a think off the top of my head. Trying to think, when have we seen drivers like this show emotion? Okay, so in similar circumstances, Schumacher, Benetton, Adelaide, when he won the championship, not similar circumstances that one, but he was crying his eyes out then. I remember him breaking down in a press conference when he passed Senna's win record. That's just two from Schumacher that come to mind. Massa was in tears about 8 times whenever emotional things happened. I remember Hamilton being in tears before. And if you're looking back at similar times as well, Hakkinen, when he crashed out in Monza going for the championship, he was in the woods in tears. Bedoya and Minardi, he was in tears. Alonso on the top step in Valencia that time. Like, it happens all the time. They're not all unfeeling little. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. I'm going to censor myself. But yeah, it's completely unacceptable. That is his driver as well. That's the person driving for his team. I don't know why we give him any kind of credence in the media whatsoever. I mean, we're playing into it because we're talking about it now. But to say that is embarrassing, whether it's embarrassing for him or embarrassing for Formula One, I don't know. Look, he's entitled to be upset. He's achieved this dream of Formula One. The last time he was in a competitive car, he was on the second row, I think it was, for the final race of the season, the championship decider with Gabby Bortoletto, and he stalled on the grid. That must have been a huge blow for him because at that point his Formula One seat wasn't decided. It was still Perez in the Red Bull. And now he's come here. He's had a really good showing in testing. He's had a really good showing in practice and qualifying. He's got all his family there. He's got all his friends there. It's his Formula One debut. It's his first race. He's all geared up and he doesn't even get to take the start because of something that he's done. So of course he's going to be upset. He's a young lad. It's his Formula One debut. He's allowed to be upset. So it's such an outdated mentality of don't show your emotions, lock it all up, don't let the world see it. It's embarrassing. And I mean, Marco's a man of a certain age, so I guess we can kind of expect that. We can't accept it, but we can expect it from him. So I'm just not giving him the airtime, to be honest. I'm not even going to think about him because what he says has no bearing on my opinions of Formula One.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's the thing. You almost don't want to bring it up because you think maybe he's doing this to get attention. But I also think it's important to hold people accountable for the words, particularly when they're that nasty at the end of the day and that wrong. Yeah, just really sad. And this is what he's saying publicly. Like, can you imagine what the guy's saying privately to these kids? It absolutely. I mean, we talked about it extensively here on the Grid Talk podcast, where the Red Bull meat grinder, I think I've referred to it on a number of occasions. And you think about all these drivers. You think about how good Perez was before he joined Red Bull. You think about how good Albon has been since he's left Red Bull. You think about how good Gasly's been since he's left Red Bull. The problem isn't the drivers; it's the pressure cooker of an environment. And the only guy that seems to have survived long term is Max Verstappen. He's the one guy who can take it because partly because he's so good, but as soon as anybody else underperforms, this is they're just laying into him, and it's not how you should nurture young talent. It's no surprise they go through drivers this quickly. I just hope that Hajar has a straightforward, simple weekend this weekend coming up because he's proven he's very quick. He qualified well. I think he was like 11th or something like that on the grid. So he's clearly got a lot of raw speed there. So yeah, just hope it's a lot simpler of a weekend for him and he can just kind of put this to one side and move on. But this weekend is a little different, Tom. We have our first sprint weekend of the year in 2025, kicking off at the amazing starting time of 3 a.m. on Saturday morning here in the UK. China is hosting the first of 6 sprint rounds in 2025. I think the format is exactly the same as last year. We've got 5 of the 6 rounds from last year being this year, just one change in terms of the venues for it. Has your opinion on sprint races changed? And you're expecting much from the shorter race here in China this weekend?
Well, my opinion on sprint races generally is that I like the races themselves are fine. You know, they're the opening stint of a Grand Prix. There's not much in the way of strategy. So if you can't overtake, you can't overtake. It's just a boring race. But the sprint weekends generally are so much more energized, and the races are always better. And I don't know why. I don't know why they're always better. I don't know if it's just because it's the single practice session or if it's just having that extra competitive session in there. But just the whole weekend just feels like a whirlwind. And I actually really enjoy sprint weekends. I don't necessarily enjoy the amount of extra content that is there to consume because weekends are particularly busy for me. And I quite like because I'm crazy and I excuse me, because I'm crazy and I start work at stupidly early in the morning. Generally, when we've got sprint races, I'm at work. So I quite like the early starts. And I was about to say, I'm really looking forward to this weekend because I get to sit there and watch a sprint race uninterrupted without having to go to work. Then remembered it's my rest day Saturday, and now I'm going to have to get up at 3 in the morning on my day off to watch it. So, but at least I don't have to worry about going to work afterwards. So it'll be fine. So yeah, no, my opinion hasn't really changed on sprints, but I just don't. I wish they just didn't back end the ones at the end of the season so much. You have 2 or 3 quite early doors, and then there's nothing for ages, and then you've got loads at the end. And it just bothers me a bit because I don't want the championship to be decided on sprint race. We had that in 2023. I just I'm happy for sprints to be there, but I don't really want any past round 21 realistically because we don't want the championship being won on a Saturday unless it's in Las Vegas. Realistically, they're not the main event. People tune into the main event to see a Grand Prix, and I think it just spoils it. But that's just for a championship situation. But if you're just talking about the races themselves, I do enjoy them. I do think it's certainly better than having a practice, a qualifying session, a sprint race, and a Grand Prix. I would have that every time over 3 practice sessions.
Yeah, I get it. It's a bit of variety there at the end of the day. There is more content there. Every day does matter as well, because there is that argument of, Friday, if you go in as a fan, doesn't really matter. But as someone who's been lucky enough to go to a few Grand Prix, I would never say that a day at Formula One is a wasted day. It's awesome seeing those cars go around the track. But yeah, I do take your point, because we do have 3 sprint races towards the back end of the calendar, USA, Brazil, and Qatar. And there is a real possibility that the championship could be decided at one of those. And it's not really spread out as much as it should be. I'm not so sure I'm a big fan of China being a sprint, though. That was my thing. Partly because of the timings are absolutely horrible for us in Europe. And I know that'd be like, oh, woe is me, well, Australians have it way tough. And they do, don't get me wrong. But you got to think from an optics point of view of Formula One wanting to hit their target markets. USA and Europe are probably the 2 biggest. And you've basically locked out all of Europe with that. And the vast majority of Europe is not going to watch that live. And I suppose for the States, it's not too bad because it makes it like a Friday night race for them. So it kind of balances out a little bit in that regard. But I'd argue that China's not the best really for a sprint race. But then it's like, where would you have it, early on in the season? Maybe Bahrain if we didn't go testing there, somewhere like that. But I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I've got a feeling this is a separate issue. I've got a feeling that Bahrain's probably going to be boring this year because we've had pre-season testing there. So I don't know. Where would you choose? Where would you go for? Would you keep it at China for the first one?
I mean, Australia would be good for jeopardy, but it's not really great for overtaking. Saudi was less chaotic than I thought it was going to be. I think Miami was okay when they had it. I think did they have one at Imola 1 year? I didn't really enjoy that one. Did they have one at Imola, or am I
I
imagining that?
think they did. They're not having it
Yeah.
anymore though.
Yeah, no, I would like to see it somewhere like Canada. I don't think it will, but I would like to
Yeah.
see a sprint at Canada. I think that would be a really great place. We've had one sprint at Silverstone, which was the very first one, and never since. I realised we got to spread them out, but I don't understand why we just have to do them at Austria every year. Is there one at Austria again this year, or is it?
That's the one they've took away.
Oh,
They've
okay.
heard your complaints, Tom.
Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, for me, I would, if you're doing them earlier in the season, I think, yeah, I think probably I would be okay with a Saudi sprint. Definitely not a Monaco sprint. I'm just looking at the calendar now, trying to remember when everything is because it's all been moved around a lot in recent times. I hate to say Silverstone because I'm British and I don't want to. I don't want to just say yes, have the sprints in Britain. But again, the that sprint was a very good sprint race from my recollection. So I would like to see a bit more. I'm yeah, like I said, I'm fine with them. I don't expect them to be blockbuster. I don't expect them to be filled with overtaking because why would there be? Realistically, that they're not going
Mm.
to be blockbuster events. So, I'm yeah, I think my stance is pretty clear on that. Just not really. I don't think it'll work at China, but you never know. I mean, there is at least you at least can overtake at China, massive long straight and a big heavy
Mm.
braking zone, and then the following turn into the start finish straight, and again into turn one. So at least there is a section of the track where you can do some overtaking, but it's not. It's just a bit bland. It's just a bit beige. It's not really. It doesn't fill me with excitement to think, oh, sprint race in China. Whereas like sprint race in Saudi, you're just like, oh, really? You know, it just kind of like, or Baku, you're just like, oh, okay, hang on, this could be interesting. But yeah, China, it's just like, oh, okay, great, yeah, I'll go and have my vanilla milkshake and my flat white.
It's a hard life, isn't it? But yeah, let us know what you guys think about sprint races as well, because we've got the first sprint coming up this weekend as well. You can find us anywhere where you can find the at symbol. We are at Grid Talk UK, and let us know as well if you're enjoying this show. We'd really appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you're one of the 71% of people watching this on YouTube who are not subscribed to our channel, please do consider subscribing to the YouTube. Leave us a like, leave us a share, leave us everything like that. And of course, we do go out live an hour or so after the event. Even for the early races like Australia, we did that last weekend, and we're doing the same for China this weekend as well. Tom grimaces at that because it was such an early start for us here in the UK. But it's all right. That's the worst one. Well, the worst one's out of the way now.
I'm fine with the early starts. I was grimacing because I was supposed to be on that podcast and I wasn't able to because my son was teething, and I had I had some house guests that were quite annoyed that I left the house to watch it at someone else's house, and then they called me saying, "Can we have some help, please? He's crying and I can't stop him." So then I had to abandon the podcast and watch the race on a delay. So sorry again for that. I was supposed to be on that review, and I'm gutted because it would have been a great review to be on. But no, I will never moan at the early starts because, like I said, weekends for me are quite busy, and I like the fact that I can watch the Grand Prix and still get the day in doing whatever else I need to do. And also, like you say, there's only 4 of them, so I'm not fussed if we got 4 bad races. If there's anything up to 10 bad races in the season, then I'm absolutely fine with that. But yeah, so that's just me. Was there a question on with that, or am I just commenting on your thoughts?
Just commenting on my thoughts. It's
Yeah.
all right, mate.
Okay.
I was going to chime in. If you think it's difficult now, wait till he's walking around like my boy. He'll turn off the Wi-Fi before you knew it and just stop you actually going. That did happen a few times. Abu Dhabi Review 2021, totally not controversial race. My son actually did turn off the Wi-Fi mid podcast. So yeah, that was.
It's happened twice. I wasn't on Abu Dhabi 2021, but I was on a podcast with you where it just died, and I had to take over hosting duties at short notice because he turned the Wi-Fi off. So
Yeah,
yes, looking
because
forward to that.
yeah, well, he was very smart because if he does that, I'll come racing downstairs to come and see him. So,
Yeah,
he achieved his mission.
yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on back to the actual F1 rather than talking about our kids. Disappointing weekend for Ferrari in Australia, to say the least. I mean, there were rumors, there were rumblings about them being 4th fastest, and I would honestly thinking, no, they can't be. Surely not. No way a Mercedes faster. No way they're miles behind everybody else. But they were. They qualified on the 4th row of the grid. They were behind a Williams and a Racing Bull, who were real surprise packages, especially the Racing Bull. I did not expect them to be that far up. And in the race, they really were not that much better, partly because of some bad strategy in there, of course, as well. But Honestly, it looks at the moment as though Ferrari are fourth fastest, Tom, when a lot of people are thinking, myself included, these guys are going to be in the hunt for the championship this year. Is this a freak of Australia, or is this just a sign of things to come for the Scuderia?
I think it's more down to the track. I don't think Ferrari know what the problem was, and they went into Australia expecting to be competitive, and they weren't. And they definitely were close to McLaren in Bahrain. I know obviously Bahrain's not great for McLaren, so but you take that away, they've lost pace to Mercedes. George Russell was clearly faster than both Ferrari drivers all weekend. There was no jeopardy in there whatsoever. Really, the only person they were able to be ahead of really was Lawson, who just wasn't at the races at all. So it was disappointing. There was a bad strategy call in there, but do you know what? I'm going to give them some slack for that. I'm going to cut them some slack because I think they were going to finish what fifth and sixth or something, and then as a result, they ended up in seventh and eighth, and then it ended up being eighth and 10th, I think, at the end. So, or it might have been seventh and 10th. I can't remember, to be honest, but I think it's cost them a couple of points, but it could have won them the race. There was if when Bortoleto and Lawson crashed out, if that had happened 10 seconds later, we could have a red flag, and then all of a sudden Hamilton's in the lead of the race on fresh tyres. So it could easily have happened. You never know these things. If you don't do something different, you're just going to end up at the back. And another team we're probably going to come on to later, Haas tried to do something different and then backed out of it. What's the point? You've just ruined your race for the sake of it. At least they tried it, but it was obvious it wasn't. It was obvious it wasn't going to work. So then they just said, "Well, okay, we're still going to get some points. It's not working. Let's just can it now and then and bank the points." So I kind of respect that in a way. Again, with the Haas one, like they weren't going to get points anyway. The only way the Haas would have got points would have been if they'd have put a different car on the top or something, or just or somehow managed to not do a pit stop. That's the only way they would have been able to get any points in that race. So yeah, I don't think they're in trouble. I think they're just not exactly where they thought they were. I think it will bounce around quite a bit. I think China will be better for them. I think Japan will be better for them. And then Bahrain, we kind of know where they're at already. They should be competitive there. So honestly, I think it's bad news for Red Bull because I think they're going to be bouncing around between Red Bull and Mercedes are going to be there as well. I just think that this this weekend was all about Max Verstappen's performance to get that second place. It was phenomenal. He did not deserve to be in that position in that car. I don't think. I think the car was better than the Ferraris, but he didn't deserve to be, and obviously helped by Antonelli. But he didn't deserve to be where he was ahead of Piastri and ahead of Russell on pure pace. So I think with the Ferraris coming back into it, I think we're going to see a lot more Red Bull looking a little bit glum. They need to get on top of that because they are a team who are in more trouble, I think, than Ferrari personally.
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell where Red Bull are because obviously Lawson had a horrible qualifying, was well down the order, took a long, long time to get past the Haas of it was either Behrman or Ocon, I forget which one. But it took him a long, so it was very hard to tell where he actually was. And by the time he actually could have got some clean air, oh, he's off the road. So we don't actually know really where Red Bull are because using Max Verstappen as a as a yardstick doesn't really seem fair. Yeah, we'll have to see with Ferrari. It could well just be a case of the car not suiting that track, being very different conditions. They did seem good in testing in Bahrain, but it's so hard to tell from testing. It's so difficult. We've seen so many teams do very well. I mean, Alpine looked pretty good in testing. I'd argue they didn't look that great in Australia, so I don't know. We'll have to see. This would be a more telling week, and this is a more standard kind of track in most likely more standard conditions as well. So this would probably be a better barometer in China of where they actually are. Same for Red Bull as well, to be fair. But yeah, you mentioned Haas there. I was so disappointed with Haas, and again, it's probably a case of the track. It probably is the conditions and everything, but they were so far behind. They qualified absolute dead last. Behrman crashed twice in practice, sat out another practice session as well. So he's got very little experience in the car. He's going to get one practice session at best this time around in China. So he's under a bit of pressure with that. But even in the hands of Ocon, who is a much more experienced driver, granted one I don't particularly rate highly, but still someone who's a more experienced driver, the car just looked the worst. Even the Saubers looked better. Bortoleto, bless him, managed to get into Q2. Hulkenberg managed to get solid points. I mean, it's very early days. It's only one race, Tom, but it does feel a bit panic stations almost for Haas because a lot of their competitors who they were going to battle with and expect to probably be behind them scored very good points in Australia.
Yeah, and Ayuka Matsu said at the start of last season that if everyone performs as they should do, Haas will be last in the championship because they are the smallest team. They've got the smallest budget. They've got the least personnel, the least ability to kind of develop out of that situation. But they looked. I'm annoyed at Haas and I'm annoyed at Sauber because I kind of thought I was being mean on Haas by putting them as a prediction of being ninth in the Constructors' Championship. That's where I put them as being. And the only team behind them were Sauber. But Sauber brought an update to the first race. They brought the biggest update of anyone to the first race. But to be honest, that just got them where they should have been in the first place, to be honest. They were like, they bought like half a car to the to the testing. It wasn't. It was most of it was 2024's car, and it's they bought the shell and just bolted all the bits on for the first race. So I'm annoyed they fooled me into thinking that they were going to be well off the back, and then as a result, Haas would just naturally kind of start the season fairly well, and then just kind of fall into their natural position. But it'd be too late for Sauber. But no, Sauber, credit to them. Like Bortoleto looked good. Hulkenberg made a small mistake, which put him out in Q1, but he probably had the pace for Q2 as well, which then would have meant that Bortoleto didn't. So yeah, they do look decent, and Haas just don't. I think they are the backmarkers. They didn't do any high speed running, high performance running at all in testing. Now, was that because they knew the car was slow and they didn't want the lap times to show that, or was that they just thought, well, why bother? Why bother doing a high performance? Take the fuel out, it goes faster. That's what happens, isn't it? And by not doing that, have they missed something fundamental with their car? I think it's probably more likely to be that. I think with their testing plan, they've fundamentally missed something that they need to understand. So I'm hoping for their sake that it's just that they're not understanding the car and something, because they legitimately came into Australia thinking they were going to be in the midfield and they were nowhere. So something, again, like Ferrari, something has happened, something's gone wrong. They don't understand something about that car. So I'm hoping for their sake that they can get back on top of it. But yes, at the moment, absolutely, they are the back marker team.
It does unfortunately seem like that is the way. But those are all the topics we were wanting to discuss. So let's get into some predictions. So, Tom, your predictions for pole position, top three, and of course, the bold prediction as well.
I'm going to be honest, I completely forgot we were doing this, so I haven't thought about anything. So this is going to be completely off the cuff. Right. Pole position. Pole position. In China. I said Piastri on Australia, and I think I'm gonna stick to that. I think I'm gonna say Piastri again because he was very close to Norris, and I think McLaren will be a step up. So I'm gonna stick with Piastri. Top three, I think, if memory serves, it's fairly heavy on tyre wear because of the fast corners. So I think it's going to be Norris who wins the race with Piastri second. I think it's going to be McLaren 1-2. And I am going to go for a Kimi Antonelli maiden podium for third place, which is not my bold prediction.
All right, all right.
Okay, so my bold prediction. I think it needs to be. So we're looking at high day. So I'm going to go for double points for Sauber.
Okay, all
Double
right.
points for Sauber. They've already scored more points than they did the entirety of last season, so they're going to triple it. They're going to get a ninth and 10th or a seventh and eighth or something. There we go. What about yourself?
That's actually quite a smart one with Sauber because they did quite well there last year. They almost got points in the sprint with Zhou Guanyu, I think, and Sauber as well. They seem to do really well around tracks with long corners, Qatar and China being two of the few like that. I mean, I went for, just for variety's sake, I went for Piastri for pole as well for Australia, and I went for a Norris win. But I'm going to go with it being a slightly more dull one. I'm going to go for Norris to get the win. I'm going to go for him getting pole as well. Piastri in second because McLaren they just look so good. It feels great to say it as a McLaren fan, but they really do. And then I think we're going to have a new version of Hambot Ver. I think we're going to see that podium quite a bit in a sense, like reincarnated this time with McLaren instead of Mercedes, McLaren Mercedes instead of Mercedes. So I'm going to go with Max Verstappen for third. Bold prediction. You had a great one with Sauber there. I've got to think of something different though for variety's sake. I am gonna say. Let me think. Who could do well around here? You know what? Because we said they're going to be back markers. Let's turn the craziness up. Haas for a point. Haas are going to score a
Yay!
point at some point. And I've got two opportunities as well. There's a sprint race, so although getting the top eight is a really big ask, but so is getting a top 10. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. It's not part of our official F1 predictions. It is the bold prediction because you can't quantify it because I'd probably get 100 points if I managed to get that right at this rate. But if you want to hear some more from us, where can you go, Tom? I mentioned in the intro you're part of Grid Talk, but of course as well you are one half of the dynamic duo of F1 podcasting, the Monkey Seat.
Yeah, we're actually recording straight after this. Double duty to podding tonight. So myself and Carl just chat about F1. Really, we sometimes review a race if we can be bothered. If not, we just make bad predictions. We talk about what we think and what we don't understand and what we do understand. And occasionally, like it can be quite funny. So yeah, give us a listen. We're on the socials at Monkey Seat Pod, and yeah, you just search for us on the podcast platforms. We're on all the usual ones.
Yeah, what was it? Grid Talk's dirty sister or something like that. You
Dirty
like
cousin, I think.
dirty cousin.
Something
That's
like that.
it.
Yeah, there's no monetization. There's no adverts. There's no filter. Put it that way. There's no bleep button.
Some would say it needs one, but anyway, it is fantastic entertainment. I always do listen to you guys talk about F1 and everything else going on in the world. So yeah, definitely go check those guys out. If you want to hear some more from me, I am the guy behind the videos of F1 Chronicles. So you can head over to Microsoft, head over to YouTube, Facebook. We are the largest F1 Substack newsletter in the world as well. You can get a lot of our content on there. Of course, the F1 Chronicle website as well, f1chronicle.com. Just search F1 Chronicle or Formula Reports, depending on the platform to find us on that other stuff as well. As we're going through a bit of a rebrand at the moment, so yeah, kind of between the two names there. But yeah, Grid Talk. If you want to see some more from this show, of course, we are available on YouTube, where our race review shows are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search for F1 Grid Talk for our massive back catalogue of shows. Over 400 episodes now, going towards 500, with previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? Of course, we've got some exclusive stuff on there, such as Beyond the Grid Talk as well. And keep your eyes peeled as well for Grill the Grid Talk. 3 rounds are out, 2 more still to go. So yeah, we'll see how well or badly we did in those remaining 2 challenges, because Louis absolutely designed the mother of all F1 quizzes for us to go through there. But yeah, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to find out when the next show is going to go live, and we'll be back soon with some more F1 content. We're back on Sunday morning for you guys in Europe to review the Chinese Grand Prix. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.